Am I remarried as a single mom? But my son refused to call him dad. I don't care what you say, Mom. He's not my dad, and I'm never going to call him that. 12-year-old Ethan's words hung in the air between us, his eyes flashing with a determination that broke my heart. 3 months into my marriage with David, and the wall between my son and my husband seemed to grow taller every day. I had thought time would heal the wounds, that patience would bridge the gap. But standing in our kitchen that evening, watching my son storm away and my husband's shoulders slump in defeat, I wondered if I had made the biggest mistake of my life by trying to create a new family from our broken pieces. If you're feeling the weight of this family struggle already, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring more of these real, emotional stories that remind us we're never alone in our challenges. My journey as a single mother began when Ethan was just 4 years old. His father, Mark, had walked out on us after declaring that family life wasn't what he had envisioned for himself. The divorce was quick but painful, leaving me to pick up the pieces of our shattered life while trying to explain to a confused preschooler why Daddy wasn't coming home anymore. For 8 years, it had been just Ethan and me against the world. We developed our own routines, inside jokes, and ways of doing things. I worked as an elementary school teacher, arranging my schedule to maximize my time with him. Weekends were sacred, movie nights with homemade popcorn on Fridays, soccer games on Saturdays, and lazy Sunday brunches where we'd talk about everything and nothing. We weren't perfect, but we were a team. Dating wasn't even on my radar until Ethan turned 10. By then, the raw wound of Mark's abandonment had scarred over, though it still ached during milestone moments when a father's presence was glaringly absent. My sister, Jen, had been gently encouraging me to get back out there for years, but I always brushed her off. I don't have time to date, I'd tell her. Between work and Ethan, there aren't enough hours in the day. That's just an excuse, Rachel, she'd counter. Ethan's getting older. He needs to see you as a woman with her own life, not just as his mom. I resisted until the elementary school hired a new 5th-grade teacher, David Chen. Tall, with kind eyes that crinkled when he smiled and a quiet confidence that put everyone at ease, David was impossible not to notice. We met during a faculty meeting, where he thoughtfully challenged some of the administration's new testing policies. I admired his advocacy for the students, and when he asked if I wanted to grab coffee to discuss some collaborative teaching ideas, I surprised myself by saying yes. Coffee led to lunch, which led to more conversations. David was divorced too, though he didn't have children. He had been married to his college sweetheart for 5 years before they realized they wanted different things. She pursued a high-powered career in New York, while he preferred the meaningful work of shaping young minds in our small suburban community. For months, David was just my colleague and friend. I didn't introduce him to Ethan, didn't even mention our growing closeness to my son. Part of me was protecting Ethan from another potential loss, but I was also protecting my own heart. The bubble of just Ethan and me felt safe, predictable. David represented uncertainty. It was David who finally pushed the issue, 6 months into our friendship. "Rachel, I care about you," he said one evening as we graded papers together in my classroom after school. "I think you know that. But I feel like there's this invisible line you won't let me cross." I set down my red pen, my heart racing. "What do you mean? You've never invited me to your home. You've never introduced me to your son. It's like you have these 2 separate lives, and I'm only allowed in one of them." His words hit me like a physical blow because they were true. I had been compartmentalizing, keeping David in a safe box labeled work friend even as my feelings for him deepened. "I'm scared," I admitted, the words barely audible. David reached across the desk and took my hand. "Of what?" "Of disrupting what Ethan and I have. Of letting someone in who might leave. Of making another mistake." "I understand that," he said gently. "But at some point, you have to decide if what we might build together is worth the risk." That night, I had a long talk with Ethan. At 11, he was perceptive and mature in many ways, though still very much a child in others. There's someone I work with who has become important to me, I explained carefully. His name is David, and he's a teacher like me. Ethan looked up from his video game, his expression guarded. Like a boyfriend? The question made me smile despite my nervousness. Yes, I suppose so. Would it be okay if he came over for dinner sometime? I'd really like you two to meet. Ethan shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant though I could see the tension in his shoulders. Whatever. It's your house. It's our house, I corrected gently. And your opinion matters to me. He turned back to his game. It's fine, Mom. Invite him if you want. That first dinner was awkward but not disastrous. David brought a Lego set for Ethan, not as a bribe, he later told me, but because he remembered me mentioning Ethan's love for building things. My son was polite but reserved, answering David's questions with minimal words and watching him with wary eyes throughout the evening. Over the next few months, David became a more regular presence in our lives. He joined us for movie nights occasionally, helped Ethan with a science project, and even started attending his soccer games. Slowly, I saw Ethan begin to relax around him, even laughing at David's terrible dad jokes and engaging him in conversations about video games and sports. When David proposed a year after we began dating, I was surprised but certain. He had proven himself patient, kind, and genuinely interested in being part of our family. He had never tried to replace Ethan's father but had created his own unique relationship with my son. Or so I thought. I told Ethan about the engagement on a Saturday morning during our traditional pancake breakfast. David asked me to marry him, I said, trying to keep my voice casual though my stomach was in knots. And I said yes. Ethan's fork clattered against his plate. You're getting married? Yes. I love him, Ethan. And I think he'll be a wonderful addition to our family. My son was quiet for a long moment, pushing his pancakes around in the pool of syrup. Does this mean he's going to live here? With us? That's generally what happens when people get married, I said, attempting a light tone. But we'll make sure the transition is smooth. Maybe you'd like to help decide how we rearrange things to make room for his stuff? Ethan didn't answer, just asked to be excused and disappeared into his room for the rest of the morning. I told myself he just needed time to process, that change was hard for everyone. David was understanding when I called him, assuring me that he expected some adjustment period and was committed to making it work. The wedding was small, just family and close friends in my sister's backyard. Ethan agreed to be our ring bearer, though his smile in the photos looked forced. David's parents flew in from California, warm and welcoming, immediately treating Ethan like a grandson. My own parents had passed away years earlier, my father before Ethan was born, and my mother when he was a toddler, so having David's family embrace us so readily felt like a gift. The problems began in earnest when David moved in. Suddenly, our comfortable routines were disrupted. David was an early riser who made breakfast for everyone, while Ethan and I had always been more haphazard in our morning meal approach. David was neat and organized, while we had a more relaxed attitude toward household order. Small frictions that I had hoped would smooth out with time instead seemed to multiply. 2 weeks after the wedding, I overheard David asking Ethan if he needed help with his math homework. No thanks, my son replied stiffly. My mom helps me with homework. Your mom is taking a bath right now, David pointed out reasonably. And I'm pretty good at math. I teach it, remember? I'll wait for her. Later that night, after Ethan was in bed, David brought up the interaction. I feel like I'm walking on eggshells with him, he admitted. Every time I try to help or suggest something, he shuts me down. He just needs time, I said, though doubt was beginning to creep in. This is a big adjustment for him. For all of us, David corrected gently. I left my apartment, my independence. I'm trying to fit into your established life. I just wish he'd give me a chance. The situation came to a head 3 months into our marriage, on a regular Tuesday evening. David had cooked dinner, his specialty stir-fry that even Ethan usually enjoyed. We were eating when David casually mentioned that he'd signed Ethan up for a father-son camping trip organized by the school. "I thought it would be good for us to have some bonding time," he explained. "Just the two of us in the great outdoors." Ethan's face darkened. "You didn't ask me if I wanted to go." "I thought it would be a nice surprise," David said, his smile faltering. "If you don't want to go, we don't have to." "I don't want to go with you," Ethan said, his voice rising. "You're not my dad. You don't get to sign me up for father-son anything." "Ethan!" I exclaimed, shocked by his outburst. "Apologize right now." "No." He stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Everyone keeps acting like he's my new dad, but he's not. My dad is in Seattle with his new family. This guy is just some teacher you married. That's enough." My voice was sharper than I intended, fueled by the hurt I saw flash across David's face. "I don't care what you say, Mom. He's not my dad, and I'm never going to call him that." Ethan's final words before he stormed out of the kitchen and slammed his bedroom door. The silence he left behind was deafening. David sat motionless, staring at his plate. "He didn't mean it," I said weakly. "Yes, he did." David's voice was quiet. "And maybe he's right. I'm not his father. I can't replace Mark, no matter how much I might want to be a father to him." "David." "It's okay, Rachel. I knew this wouldn't be easy. I just didn't realize how hard it would be to love someone who doesn't want your love." That night, after David had gone to bed, I knocked on Ethan's door. He was sitting on his bed, a photo album open beside him, the one that contained pictures from before the divorce, when we had been a family of 3. "Can we talk?" I asked, sitting beside him. He shrugged, not meeting my eyes. "I know this has been really hard for you," I began. "And I understand that you miss your dad." "No, you don't," he muttered. "You hate Dad." The accusation stung. "I don't hate your father, Ethan. I'm disappointed in the choices he made, but he gave me you, and I could never hate him for that." "Then why did you have to marry someone else? Why couldn't it just stay you and me?" The question broke my heart because part of me had wondered the same thing in moments of doubt. Had I been selfish in wanting more than our comfortable twosome? "Because I fell in love," I said simply. "And because I thought, I still think, that David can bring something good to our lives. Not as a replacement for your dad, but as someone else who cares about you." "He doesn't even know me," Ethan protested. "He's trying to," I pointed out. "But you have to let him." Ethan was quiet for a long moment. "What if I don't want another dad?" "Then don't think of him that way," I suggested. "Think of him as a friend. Or a stepdad. Or just David. You don't have to call him Dad if you're not comfortable with that." "Really?" He looked up, surprised. "Really? No one is trying to erase your father from your life, Ethan. David knows that Mark will always be your dad. But he signed me up for that father-son thing. Because he wants to spend time with you," I explained. "He's trying to find ways to connect with you. Maybe it wasn't the right approach, but his heart was in the right place." Ethan considered this. "I guess I was pretty mean to him." "You were," I agreed. "And I think you owe him an apology. But after that, maybe you two can start fresh. No pressure, no expectations. Just getting to know each other." The next morning, Ethan surprised me by getting up early. When I came into the kitchen, he was helping David make pancakes, carefully flipping them under David's guidance. They weren't talking much, but the tension from the night before had eased. "Morning," David greeted me with a cautious smile. "Ethan's becoming quite the pancake chef." "I can see that," I said, my heart lightening at the sight of them working together. Over breakfast, Ethan cleared his throat nervously. "I'm sorry about what I said yesterday. It wasn't cool." David nodded. "Thank you for apologizing. And I'm sorry too, I should have asked you before signing us up for that trip. It was presumptuous of me." "What does presumptuous mean?" Ethan asked. "It means I made an assumption I shouldn't have," David explained. "I assumed you'd want to go camping with me, without checking with you first." Ethan considered this. "I do like camping. My dad used to take me sometimes, before he moved." A flicker of pain crossed David's face, but he masked it quickly. "Well, if you ever want to go, the offer stands. No pressure." "Maybe," Ethan said, which felt like a monumental concession. That small exchange marked the beginning of a thaw between them. It wasn't an overnight transformation, there were still arguments, misunderstandings, and moments of jealousy on Ethan's part. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, things began to change. David started asking Ethan's permission before making suggestions or plans that involved him. Ethan, in turn, began to include David in some of our family traditions, like movie night. They discovered a shared love of basketball and started shooting hoops in the driveway on weekends. 6 months into our marriage, Ethan had a major soccer tournament. Mark had promised to fly in for it, but called the night before to cancel, citing work commitments. Ethan was devastated, trying to hide his tears as he got ready for bed. "He always does this," he said bitterly. "He always says he'll come and then doesn't." I didn't know what to say. No words could ease the pain of his father's repeated disappointments. The next morning, Ethan was quiet and withdrawn as we drove to the tournament. David had come with us, as he had for all of Ethan's games since becoming part of our family, but he gave my son space, sensing his mood. Ethan's team made it to the finals, and in the last few minutes of the game, with the score tied, he scored the winning goal. The crowd erupted, parents cheering wildly. I jumped up and down, screaming his name. And beside me, David was on his feet, his face alight with pride, shouting encouragement. After the medal ceremony, Ethan ran over to us, his face flushed with victory and excitement. "Did you see that?" he asked breathlessly. "Did you see my goal?" "We saw it." I hugged him tightly. "You were amazing." When I released him, he turned to David, hesitating for just a moment before throwing his arms around him too. "I used that move you showed me, the one where you fake left before cutting right." David's surprise quickly gave way to joy as he returned the hug. "You executed it perfectly. I'm so proud of you, buddy." That spontaneous hug was a turning point. It wasn't that all problems disappeared. Ethan still had moments of missing his biological father acutely, still sometimes resented David's presence in our lives. But he had begun to see that there was room in his heart for both men, albeit in different ways. A year into our marriage, we faced another challenge when I discovered I was pregnant. David and I were thrilled, but I worried about how Ethan would take the news. Would he feel replaced? Would the progress he and David had made be undone? We told him together, sitting in the living room after dinner. "Ethan, we have some news," I began carefully. "I'm going to have a baby. You're going to be a big brother."